What's up, dudes? So there's been tons of rumors going around that the Switch 2 is coming out soon. I'm not sure how true that is, but I want to look into it for myself. So today we're going to look at a video by Zone of Tech and then see everything that we know so far. Along the way, I'm going to give my own commentary, and then I would love to hear your guys' thoughts as well too. All right, let's dive into it.
There have been lots of leaks and news about Nintendo's upcoming Switch 2, with some of the info coming not just from large companies like Microsoft, but also from Nintendo themselves. So here's everything we know, from the release date to the performance upgrades, to games, to backwards compatibility, and new features. So when it comes to the release date, according to a Chinese investment firm called Money DJ, the next-gen Switch will be launching in the first quarter of 2024. But okay, who are Money DJ? Do they have any
Okay, let's hold on right there for a second. The first quarter of the year, that would mean between January and March. That would be freaking awesome. I would love to see that. But I feel like Nintendo would have already released some kind of news or a trailer or something like that. Unless they're just going to announce it and then release it like a month later. I have no idea. Because if you saw the Switch OLED last time it released, that was in September. And that was a perfect time to release it, because the holidays and everything like that. So it's going to be really strange to see if they just announce it and then release it, because that's not usually like Nintendo, from what I think. Well, I guess so, yeah, because last time they released the OLED, that was in summer. They released it, the news of it, and then it released in September. So it's not impossible, but I'm very hopeful. I'm freaking stoked. Let's get back into it.
actual track record at all. Well, Money DJ were the first ones to release details about the original Switch's production, codenamed the NX, back in 2016, a year before the Switch actually came out. So yeah, they're definitely one of the most credible Nintendo sources. And there are many more sources pointing towards Nintendo's next-gen console. For example, according to leaker Nash Weedle, who accurately leaked Metroid Dread before it was released, he now claims that a Spanish game studio is now in possession of the Switch 2 development kit. It is very likely that the studio is Mercury Stream. They are based in Spain, and they are the same studio that made Metroid Dread, and that Nash Weedle seems to have an insider in. Now, dev kits are usually sent to developers way ahead of time in order to make sure that they have enough time to optimize their games for the new system.
That's gotta be such a cool job.
The first actual dev kit leak was this image that we posted ourselves back in October of 2019. And 13 months later, the PS5 came out. So if we consider a similar timeline, then the Switch 2 would indeed come out in 2024. Maybe not quite Q1, but definitely in the first half of the year. But there's even more evidence. In the famous or infamous Microsoft versus FTC trial, a leaked document seems to show Microsoft acknowledging the new Switch model that is currently in development. So 2024 is likely when we'll see this new.
I've actually heard about that as well too. There's been different game conventions where the Switch 2 was presented, and I'm not sure how true that is, but that must be freaking awesome. Can you imagine going to a game convention, you're like super elite up in those kind of companies, and you get to see the Switch 2 firsthand before it's even like announced? That's badass.
Switch. So, okay, new Switch model coming out next year, but I think the most important question is, how will it be any different from the Switch and the Switch OLED? Well, one of the big changes would of course be in terms of the performance. The current Switch is quite underpowered for today's standards. Even when it came out in 2017, it was already using the Tegra X1, a chip originally released in 2015 for the $200 TV box, the Nvidia Shield. Luckily, Nintendo and third-party developers managed to optimize their games to an outstanding level, to the point where we got titles like The Witcher 3, No Man's Sky, Fortnite, Doom Eternal, and many more. But that doesn't mean that these games ran great. The Witcher 3 ran at a dynamic 540p resolution, at super low graphics, and also at a capped 30 FPS frame rate, with a lot of drops below that. So how powerful would the Switch 2 really be? Well, according to Bobby Kotick's emails that got published in the Microsoft vs. FTC hearing, the Switch 2 would have a similar level of performance to the PS4. Bobby, being the CEO of Activision Blizzard, definitely has a good deal of insight, given that he was literally talking to Nintendo's president, Shunaro Furukawa, in those emails. Now, some of you might be a bit skeptical when hearing this. how could the Switch 2 be as powerful as the PS4 when the Switch is just a handheld console, while the PS4 was substantially bigger and required a constant power source? Well, technology has evolved quite a lot in the past 10 years. In fact,
That's
the Steam
true.
Deck has a total compute power of 1.6 teraflops. The PS4 had 1.84. So the Steam Deck is already extremely close to the PS4 in terms of its performance. And keep in
Wow.
mind that a Steam Deck will be 2 years old by the time the Switch 2 launches.
So I can actually see how that could be true. Because personally, I have a Rogue Asus Ally, and I love that. It's a handheld PC gaming device, and it's awesome. The only drawback is that it's heavier than heck. So it's not super heavy, but I'm just saying it's, for pick up and play, it's not really that convenient. It's one of those consoles where you got to turn it on, let it boot up, do your updates and all that kind of stuff on it. But if they did that with a Switch and made it even more powerful, that would be amazing. So I don't doubt that. But the only thing that I don't want to happen is if the new Switch, it's so powerful, but it's super heavy. That's going to take away the main aspect of a handheld. So in my opinion, the point of a handheld is comfortability and portability. And it's got to be comfortable to hold for hours on end for long gaming sessions, and how portable it is. If you have a big old bulky thing like the Steam Deck or the Rogue Asus Ally, it's not really that convenient, in my opinion. And I just hope they don't make it too bulky and too heavy. It's like, do what you got to do, but keep in mind that it's a handheld, and to keep it, comfortable and lightweight. Like personally, me, I love the Switch Lite. So when the Switch 2 comes out, I hope there's the Switch 2 and the Switch 2 Lite. I really hope they make another Lite version because, in my opinion, that's one of the best handhelds that's ever existed. I love the Switch Lite. Let's go.
So a similar level of performance to the Steam Deck is extremely likely. So at about 1.6 teraflops, the Switch 2 would be 4 times more powerful than the original Switch in
Wow.
handheld mode, and 3.2 times more powerful in docked mode. This
Damn.
might not seem like a big upgrade for a chip that's almost 10 years newer than what the original Switch had,
Well, it's
especially when you
something.
consider that the current gen consoles are up to 8.5 times more powerful than their previous versions. But there's actually way more at play here. You see, this new chip is said to be made by NVIDIA again, and it's rumored to be based on an 8nm manufacturing process down from the original Switch's 20nm or 16nm, which is what we have on the Switch version 2, the Redbox Switch, and the Switch OLED. What this means is that we'll be getting a lot more performance for a lot less power. And with technologies such as DLSS that will automatically upscale the
Yeah.
footage to resolutions like 4K when docked, and ray tracing, the improvements in visuals will be far greater than what that 4x number would suggest. And all of this sounds great, but performance doesn't really mean much if you don't have some great games to take advantage of it. But performance doesn't really
kinda wanna say
far
that again.
greater than what that
So, excuse me. I think that would be amazing. That's a really, really good idea. Upscaling, AI upscaling. I'm actually a fan of that. If the Switch 2 is indeed backwards compatible and it upscales your old games on the Switch, that would be freaking awesome. That would be so cool. I would love to see that. That's something I would definitely love to see because it would be kind of like the PS5 and the PS4. So when the PS5 first came out, you got your PS5 exclusive games and they looked and ran amazing. And then you threw your old PS4 games in the PS5 and they looked way better and ran amazing. So even though they're not a PS5 game, the PS5 made those PS4 games look absolutely incredible and run great. So if the Switch 2 did that with the original Switch games, dude, I'm all for it. That's freaking sick.
4x number would suggest. And all of this sounds great, but performance doesn't really mean much if you don't have some great games to take advantage of it. And with our current Switch, many players have been asking for AAA multiplayer titles such as Call of Duty, FIFA, Destiny, F1, but these games are just not available on the Switch at all. mostly due to its fairly weak hardware. The good news is that some AAA titles would be coming to the Switch too. In one of the leaked Microsoft vs. FTC court documents, Microsoft referred to their commitment on bringing Call of Duty to the next-gen Switch. And when Bobby Kotick referred to that PS4 level performance for the Switch 2, the reason why he said it was because that would allow them to bring COD to the Switch, as current versions of Call of Duty are still supported on the last-gen consoles. And if Call of Duty comes to the Switch 2, I can already see a lot of other developers bringing their AAA titles to the Switch 2 too. For example,
With games like that, I feel like you're going to want to play those on either PC or an actual full-blown console like PS5 or Xbox, because you want the performance and the graphics. With those kind of really fast-paced, it's using a lot of power from your console. So the Switch, as cool as it would be, in my opinion, I don't think we're there quite yet. But it's a possibility. Who knows?
Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot said that Nintendo advised them to wait until the successor to the Switch before releasing the Mario + Rabbids sequel. Ubisoft in the end decided to release it for the current Switch, which resulted in underwhelming performance and a resolution of just 612p. This is all looking very promising. Essentially, Nintendo telling developers that, hey, you might want to wait until our next console. Which to me says that they're very confident in how much more powerful this new Switch will be and what this will do to games. Which brings us to backwards compatibility.
Yes,
if
let's
buying
go.
Switch 2 means that you'll lose all of your Switch 1 games, then most people might not even bother. Therefore, backwards compatibility will be crucial here. And the good news is that it is pretty much confirmed at this point.
Yes, let's
According to Nintendo's president, Shuntaro Fukugawa, Nintendo is planning on making a smooth transition for consumers from the current Switch to their next-gen console by using the Nintendo account to migrate all data. And there's really not much data.
Dude, I cannot believe... It has to be backwards compatible. It just has to. Mainly because the fact that would be absolutely amazing. The Switch library is so vast and there's so many freaking games on the Switch. You can't just let all that go, you know what I mean? You got to have it seeping into the next generation. And that's something that I would love to see. Switch games are the games that I collect the most. That's the most games I have in my collection, honestly. There's just so many different titles, so many great freaking titles. I also collect, PS4 games and 3DS, all those games and stuff. But I seriously have over 100 Switch games, and I want to still play those on the next-gen console. That's what I'm most stoked for. Especially upscaled. Oh, man, I'm so stoked.
Stored on the Nintendo accounts, aside from, of course, saved games. Now, I am a bit worried about how well backwards compatibility would actually work on this new Switch, just as this new chip isn't just 9 years newer than what the Switch currently has, but it will also be based on a completely new architecture. So I am assuming that some sort of emulation might be required, but hopefully the hardware is powerful enough to be able to run that emulation with no impact to the user's performance. So what I'm saying is that I don't think it is quite likely that you'll be able to play Tears of the Kingdom in 4K 60 on your living room TV, but rather that the extra level performance would only be felt in the newer titles.
That right there is something I want to touch base on. So, in my opinion, me being the gamer that I am, I much prefer gameplay over graphics, performance over graphics. It's fine if it runs at 1080p, that's totally fine. But if it runs smooth and fluid at 1080p, that's what I'm talking about. You can have 4K and all that cool stuff. That's cool. 1440p. That's awesome. It really is, especially on PS5 running at 120 hertz. It looks amazing. It runs great. But especially when it comes to Switch games, they're not really that super visually that impressive. It's not those kind of games where you're going to want 4K, all those kind of... Maybe you do. I'm not sure. But me personally, 1080p for Switch games, that's totally fine. As long as it runs good. Like, there's some games that I'll play on the Switch that look really good and run amazing. Like, for example, Bayonetta. I'm pretty sure that runs at 60 hertz because it looks and runs freaking smooth. Really, really smooth. And East Origins, if you played East Origins, it looks and runs really smooth. It's almost like you're playing a little PC game on your Switch. It looks and runs amazing. So, there's definitely potential, mad potential, for the upscaling and the higher processor of the Switch 2 and playing your old Switch games. I'm about it. Let's go.
Unless, of course, Nintendo also decides to update the old titles with support for DLSS, or if they manage to somehow implement backwards compatibility without any emulation at all. But yeah, I mean, it's looking very positive so far, with 4 times better performance, backwards compatibility, and AAA titles. But
Yeah.
so far, this screams like Switch Pro rather than the Switch 2. So, will there be anything to make it the Switch 2? Well, Miyamoto himself did say that Nintendo's strength is in creating new games. With new hardware, we would like to propose unique games that cannot be realized on existing hardware, which to me sounds like the Switch 2 wouldn't necessarily be a Switch. It could in fact be something completely different. If you think about it, Nintendo had never released a version 2 of any of their consoles before. In fact, they were all quite different. The Switch was unique, and so was the Wii U before it, which was also very different from the Wii, which itself was also very different from the GameCube, and so on. But I also think that by
That's
Nintendo
true.
not releasing the Switch 2 and instead going with a standard dock console like the PS5 and the Xbox, they would just be shooting themselves in the foot, as the main reason why so many people bought the Switch was because it was a Switch. But luckily, everything tells us that this will indeed be a Switch 2. And here, I want to see some other improvements aside from just the performance. I want to see a brighter OLED display, one that's maybe 90 or even 120 Hz. I want to see a newer and a more reliable Bluetooth standard. I also want to see a better Wi-Fi card. I want
That's
to
true,
see
yep.
PS5 level of haptics, and I also want to see streaming
Yeah.
services like xCloud and GeForce Now being usable on the Switch. But some of these might not be happening, as according to Sharp, which are the main supplier for the Switch and the Switch Lite's LCD displays, they are currently working on a new LCD display for a new gaming console. Given that Nintendo is their main client, this seems to be them slightly telling their investors that they'll be making the LCD displays for the next Switch 2, which I do find quite odd, as you would assume that Nintendo would simply use an OLED panel for the Switch 2 rather than going back to LCD. Unless, of course, they release 2 models of the Switch 2,
Yes.
a regular and then a Pro, which would have an OLED display alongside a couple of extra features. I would
That is one thing that I've been wondering too. That would be really cool if they had 2 different versions, actually 3. The very, very first one being a Switch 2 Lite, like super cheap, entry level, super portable, comfortable. A Switch 2, which is pretty much your mid-range on performance and graphics. Pretty much what we have now on the Switch, but a little bit more powerful. And the Switch Pro, where you get, your bang for your buck. You get, higher frame rates, better performance, better display. That would be amazing. If they had 3 of them, that'd be really cool.
definitely be down for something like that. There's this really cool Switch 2 concept that's been floating around, showing a larger form factor that resembles an iPad. I would love to see something like that, an 11-inch 120Hz OLED
Wow.
Switch to be sold
That would
alongside
be
a more
insane.
normal-sized Switch 2. But what do you guys think? And do subscribe for more Switch 2 updates and content as soon as we have them. I'm Daniel, this means Enough Tech, and I'll see you guys in the next one. It's Enough Tech, signing out. Cheers.
That is really cool. So, well, there's some updates for you. If it does release in the beginning of this next year, that would be freaking amazing. I'm stoked for it. As always, as I always say, when it comes to developers and everything like that, don't rush it. Do what you got to do to make it work and make it right. But I'm freaking stoked. I am so stoked for the Switch 2, and I'm ready. And the fact that it's very, very, very likely that it's going to be backwards compatible, I'm even more stoked. Oh, man. Yeah, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. There were some rumors, too, going around that it was going to be dual screen. And I'm like, why would you make a Switch 2 dual screen? That's going to look so weird, and nah, I'm not about that. It was cool on the 3DS, but when I first heard that, I was like, dude, what are you doing? That's going to be so goofy. Like, there's no reasons why you should have 2 screens on a Switch. Just get a PC at that point. But yeah, so that's that. And thanks for sticking around on the channel. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. And yeah, check out Zone of Tech. He does a lot of tech reviews and different gadgets and mechanics and all that good stuff. Yeah, with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.